Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. Thank you so much for your patience. As you all are aware, we all have many tasks that we have to take care of through the course of the day, so many times they double schedule. We're here today to examine a pattern of problems with the VA.gov affecting veterans' benefit claims. VA aggressively built out VA.gov over the past 5 years. Today, it's more than a website. It's a self-service platform for veterans to access the care and benefits that they've earned. I absolutely agree that veterans should be able to manage their health care and benefits online, rather than waiting on hold with a call center to do everything. But to perform all those functions, VA.gov now interfaces with most of the systems we have discussed in previous hearings. Those systems and interfaces have significant bugs, and some of them are simply obsolete. VA.gov has gaps, and veterans are falling into those gaps. Nearly 100,000 veterans that we know of have been struggling with the VA.gov bugs to access their benefits. In some cases, these problems have been happening for years. But VA officials only recently discovered and disclosed them. In January, VA notified the committee that about 32,000 veterans' disability compensation claims submitted through the website had been rejected. This had been happening since 2018. The website didn't alert the veterans that an error had happened, so they thought that everything was normal. This is unbelievable. They just chalked it up to VA being slow on the delivery of their benefits. They never even called, inquired, or complained about it. That's how bad VA's reputation is. The website didn't alert the veterans that an error had happened, so that, again, they thought everything was normal. It took the VA 7 months to send letters to notify them. Then last month, as the intent to file deadline under the PACT Act was approaching, about 5,600 veterans received error messages when they tried to submit on the website. The VA initially had no idea what was even happening or that it was happening. On top of that, more than 56,000 veterans' requests to add or remove dependents on the VA.gov and its predecessor were not processed, causing them to be overpaid or underpaid. This has been happening all the way back to 2011. The 56,000 is just an estimate, and the department is still trying to come up with a plan on how to address the situation. Each of these 4 incidents was somewhat different, but they indicate a troubling pattern. We're going to get to the bottom of what happened and whether the glitches extend beyond the benefits functions of VA.gov and into other areas. This is the situation where the VA is badly in need of independent oversight. The veterans need to know that our witnesses have thoroughly investigated the extent of the problems, and this is not just the tip of the iceberg. The impacted veterans also need to hear from VA much more quickly. Months and years is completely unacceptable. 7 months to mail letters to the veterans whose claims were rejected is unacceptable. And the veterans whose dependent updates weren't processed deserve immediate help. When the VA central office gets around to it, is not an acceptable response. VA.gov is vital, and we need to make sure it's built on a solid foundation. I appreciate our witnesses joining us today to discuss how we're going to do just that. With that, I would yield to Ranking Member Sherflis McCormick for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. VA.gov is veterans' primary portal to access the care and benefits they have earned through their service to our country. So it is concerning when we hear that there is an issue with this website, especially when Congress learns of 3 major issues in less than 1 month. In August, VA.gov failed to keep up with what we all knew was going to be a massive influx of disability claims. Veterans had until 11:59 p.m. on August 9th to submit their claims, or intent to file a claim associated with the PACT Act to have any potential benefits backdated to when the bill was signed in August of 2022. VA received so many submissions that it broke the website's ability to process them. Veterans began receiving error messages that caused confusion about whether their claim had been received or not. Then, earlier this month, we learned that over 56,000 veterans were potentially negatively impacted by the website's failure to process veterans' dependent status updates, and that it took VA over a decade to recognize and fix this issue. As I understand it, VA still doesn't have a full understanding of the impacts of this issue on veterans and in which veterans were affected. In the same notification, we also learned that there is an issue with the VA.gov that has been preventing veterans from being able to appeal their claims decision, which is their right. I understand that the VA claims that these issues affect a small percentage of veterans, but we owe it to our veterans to ensure that they have access to functional and reliable technology to access their care and benefits. I do want to say a thank you to Assistant Secretary Del Benny and Undersecretary Jacobs for the level of transparency they have provided on the recent issues with the VA.gov. I'm not an IT expert, so I won't pretend that I fully understand the technological aspects of the issue, but I do understand how they are impacting veterans. I appreciate the VA's Office of Information and Technology seems to be hyper-focused on not only getting these identified issues fixed, but establishing a process to ensure that any future issues are identified and fixed more quickly. I'm happy to hear this, and will work with the chairman to ensure that we hold you to it. While we are talking about VA.com, I do want to talk about another issue with the website. Compliance with Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 continues to be an issue with VA's website and IT solutions. We have raised this issue repeatedly with VA, and yet we continue to hear that VA.gov fails to meet the needs of blind and low-vision veterans. This is disappointing, especially as many of these veterans lost their vision due to conditions attributed to their military service. We owe them the same level of access as their sighted colleagues. I hope to hear from today's witnesses about a plan to ensure that this resource is available to all veterans equally. I look forward to today's testimony, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick. Before we proceed, I ask unanimous consent that Mr. Luttrell and any other members of the DAMA Subcommittee be permitted to participate in this hearing. Without objection, so ordered. I will now introduce the Veterans Affairs witnesses on our first and only panel today. First, we have Assistant Secretary for Information and Technology, Kurt Del Benny. We also have Chief Technology Officer Charles Worthington. And finally, we have Mr. Ray Tellez, the Executive Director of the Office of Business Integration in the Veterans Benefits Administration. I ask the witnesses to please stand and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and let the record reflect that all the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Mr. Del Benny, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement on behalf of the panel.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify about the Department of Veterans Affairs VA.gov website. I'm accompanied today, as you noted, by Mr. Charles Worthington, VA's Chief Technology Officer, and Mr. Ray Tellez, Executive Director of the Office of Business Integration from the Veterans Benefits Administration. As this committee is aware from our numerous meetings since my confirmation, VA is committed to providing exceptional care, services, and a seamless, unified experience to our veterans. VA's Office of Information and Technology collaborates with VBA and various VA offices to achieve this mission through the delivery of state-of-the-art technology, including VA.gov, a modernized website, and VA's digital front door. Nearly 14 million unique veterans and others use VA.gov each month to access information about the services and benefits provided by the department. In August alone, we had over 19 million unique users. In the healthcare space in particular, we are an industry leader in our veterans' usage of our healthcare portal. The website is designed with a clear and intuitive navigation menu enabling users to quickly find the information that they're seeking. The VA.gov project is one of the department's most important initiatives, and for the first time in the VA's history gives a comprehensive digital experience that provides veterans a single online location to learn about, apply for, use, and manage their VA healthcare and benefits. Since its relaunch in 2018, VA.gov has seen dramatic growth, both in usage and the breadth of services offered on the platform. VA has added numerous features to the VA.gov during its high-growth period. For example, veterans can now apply for caregiver benefits, digitally submit appeals, request a debt waiver, and view their debt and co-payment balances, request and schedule healthcare appointments, and even check in for those appointments on their day of service. Integrating the various legacy systems into VA.gov has not been without challenges. As we proactively notified you on September 5th, VA recently uncovered several technical issues impacting a small percentage of the website's traffic, which we're working very hard to address. I want to be very clear that despite the limited scope of these issues, we view these problems as unacceptable, and we at the VA deeply apologize to the impacted veterans. We are working relentlessly to ensure no veteran is negatively impacted by these technical issues by ensuring veterans receive effective dates that respect their original submission timelines and forgiving any overpayment debts that may have been created due to the VA's technical mistake. Moving forward, the department is taking immediate steps to prevent issues like this from happening in the future. VA will resolve these issues, prevent them from happening again, address them more quickly when needed, and most importantly, make sure that all impacted veterans get the benefits and services that they deserve as quickly as possible. Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Sherflis McCormick, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. As I mentioned, VA.gov is one of the department's most important initiatives, and we've made a great deal of progress amid tremendous growth in capability and capacity. We look forward to continuing to work with the subcommittee to address our greatest priorities and the challenges we face in our digital transformation. We value your steadfast commitment and support for our veterans. This concludes my testimony, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Del Bene. The written statement of Mr. Del Bene will be entered into the hearing record. We will now proceed to questioning, and I will recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Del Bene, at least 94,500 veterans' benefits have been delayed or disrupted because of the VA.gov problems. I understand that you're very proud of the website and millions of veterans that use it, but this is 94,500 veterans and their families whose personal finances may be disrupted or who may be waiting for months or even years, as we've heard in the record already, for disability compensation. Mr. Del Bene, do you believe there's an acceptable error rate in VA.gov? And if so, what would you define as an acceptable error rate?
Thank you for the question. I don't believe that it is acceptable for us to have errors that occur on the website that aren't processed in a way that benefits the veterans and assures their intent. So by that, and one of the places where I think we have challenges we're working on is when an error occurs in the system, make sure it gets passed off to a human being who can do the right thing in those cases. And so in that sense, I don't think there's an acceptable error rate. And more particularly, I think every error that does occur, because in software, errors will occur, we need to, one, fix those errors, and two, we need to make sure that the veteran is handled in the appropriate way.
So, Mr. Del Bene, what concerns me the most about the VA.gov IT errors is that it took the VA years to notice them. I want to hear more about your internal review of the causes. But first and foremost, how are you going to improve your ability to detect and solve these problems in real time?
Thanks for the question. I'm actually going to pass this one to Charles Worthington, our CTO, and have him take that one on.
Thank you for the question. We are working right now urgently to create a comprehensive review of each of the products that VA.gov offers so we can get a real-time sense of the error rates with all of the downstream services that VA.gov integrates with to deliver that feature. And something that we learned as a result of this incident is that we did not have a fast enough ability to identify these issues as they occurred. And that's what we are really focused on with this first priority of getting better monitoring and observability set up. We've made a lot of progress on that goal since we announced that to you all. All of the benefit application forms are now in this dashboard with a great sense of what the success rate of each of those downstream transactions are. And we view that as you said, the time that it took the VA to identify these problems proactively was really unacceptable, and we are working hard to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
So, Mr. Worthington, as you're answering these questions, let me ask you, we've identified 4 areas that have extensive problems and delays. Which ones are you addressing first, and exactly how are you working? How many people do you have focused on those tasks?
This is a top priority of our VA.gov team to get better sense of the health of each of those products. And so we've got a daily stand-up with probably a dozen or more folks talking about the progress in increasing the monitoring of those systems. I think, as I mentioned, the benefits applications forms are all already monitored. We're also paying a lot of attention to the health enrollment form, which has the upcoming deadline of September 30th for the special enrollment period. We're seeing really positive results with that. And I think that, as Mr. DeBonning said, the ability to know with confidence that once a veteran has hit submit on an application on VA.gov, that transaction is going to be honored, even if there is a downstream error. We're paying particular attention to those because we know that those are the source of the 2 issues that led to a potential delay.
Okay, Mr. Tellez, what do you think is a reasonable turnaround time for a disability compensation claim? Let me preface that with assuming that all the proper documentation is turned in. Okay, all the proper documentation is turned in. What do you think is a reasonable time for a disability claim?
Thank you, Congressman, for your question. Right now, we define it as under 125 days, but in the world that I live in, we're trying to get those processed as quickly as possible because that's the expectation that veterans have in the real world. So I would say that would be the answer, as quick as we can. I know we've had different programs to do that. I hope that answered your question.
And Mr. Worthington, have you determined the extent of the benefits-related VA.gov problems and whether they extend into the other functions of the website, like healthcare?
We are looking very closely at that exact question to identify if there were any similar problems, such as the dependency claim or the 526 claim errors. At this point, we have not identified anything on that scale, but that is something we're looking at very intently.
Very good. Okay, I'm down to it. I recognize Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to get back to the timeliness issue that you touched upon. I want to be clear. Why did it take you so long to become aware of the issues?
If I may, thank you for the question. That you have to separate that into which particular issue we're talking about. So in the case of, for instance, dependency application to change, early on in 2021, there was an identification of an issue because the rules that were processing those were having failure cases. And at that point, there was actually a processing that was put in place. There's actually a rules processing error sheet that came out, a report that came out, and those were all manually handled by people to make sure the right thing happened. We thought at that point that was the extent of the problem until we started hearing from veterans and VSOs that there were other issues coming up, and that was actually towards the end of 2022, the very beginning of 2023. And so for that longer period of time, we actually did not think there was a broader problem. Once a broader problem was identified, we set up a cross-functional team to actually go tackle that issue and solve the bug that we did then determine existed. So in that case, that kind of explains why the gap. In other cases, it was very rapid to find the issue. So for instance, the claims application, that was actually found quite rapidly and resolved quite rapidly. The issue we had in August of the website having errors, we fixed that one very quickly as well. So it really depends upon the particular instance you're talking about.
We were talking about the issues that were identified in September 5th in the congressional notification, which you touched upon. And I also want to know, can I get your commitment that any veteran who missed out on the benefits because of the dependent status issue will be made whole and that they will receive those backdated benefits?
If I may, I'll have Ray handle that one.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Yes, you have our commitment. We are currently in the process of assessing those, but our goal will be to make those veterans whole and make sure that they get the benefit that they have earned and deserved.
And that no veteran will receive a debt because the IT system failed?
That is, the process that we're working from is not to create a debt because of the issue with the error that may have caused the debt.
Mr. Del Benny, I'm sure that you're aware that we hold a series of VSO hearings every year in the spring. Every year, we hear pleas from the Blinded Veterans Association for better oversight of VA Section 508 compliance. They've raised concerns about not only VA.gov, but also with the IT system that veterans use, both as recipients of care and benefits, and as employees of VA. Why has the VA not met the mandate of Section 508 compliance, specifically the VA.gov portal that veterans rely on to access their care and benefits?
Well, we take 508 compliance very seriously. I personally think it's a commitment that we need to honor and actually amp up our work there. Let me break that into a couple of different parts. The first thing is the VA.gov has a lot of content on it. That content can be separated into web pages or a lot of PDFs. We have been making steady progress in actually identifying the most used web pages and the most used PDFs and making sure that they are compliant with 508. If you then take the VA.gov, the functional part of it, it actually was built from the beginning to have a framework that actually makes it accessible to the blind. And so as we move more and more functionality onto VA.gov, we'll inherit that accessibility. But the one pivot we've made in the change is to actually target the things that are most used, whether it's documentation or whether it's functionality as well. And I think we're doing pretty well there. There's more for us to do, but know that we take the commitment of 508 incredibly seriously.
And what is your timeline for full implementation or even substantial completion?
Well, I think that the effort towards 508 is going to be an ongoing effort. I think we are, if you take web pages, for instance, we're in the 90% compliance in terms of the number of hits that happen, or essentially going from the most popular pages on down. Some of the thornier issues are in application spaces where there's custom logic, and those are the ones that I think are going to take a while. But I meet with the team every month to review our progress on this.
So do you have a goal date, a range that we can actually be able to follow up on?
It's a good question. You know what I'd love to do is get into a regular dialogue with you so I can show you our progress. And I think we actually have an update for staffing on the 508 progress on the 27th. So if there's specific questions, we'd love to talk to you about those and walk you through it. But I would love a regular engagement on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Surplus McCormick. I will now recognize Representative Self for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to the 56,000. When did you first discover this issue? Did I hear you say early 2021?
Mr. Tellis, do you want to take the chronology on that one?
Yes, thank you, Congressman. We first heard about it, I believe, in November of 2021, of that error issue was brought to us by IT. October of 2022, when we discovered the 32,000 veterans.
No, I'm talking about the 57,000.
The dependency claims. My apologies.
Dependencies
My
that
apologies.
Goes back to 2011.
Yeah, so we discovered that in August of 2021 is when we discovered there was a number of dependency claims that were being rejected from the system. And so we worked with IT to set up an IPT to investigate what that issue was. It wasn't until January of 2023 when we discovered there was maybe a different problem, a bigger problem, when we got feedback from our call centers from veterans who were having challenges with dependency that weren't on the list that we had. That's when we discovered there was maybe a different issue with that.
So, Mr. Del Benny, what is the QA on on this website? What is the quality assurance? What are your checks? Because we have an issue from 2018 that you finally started addressing in August of 2023. We have an issue from 2011 that you determined you finally found it in August of 2021, a decade later. So what is your quality assurance on your website? There are people, and my point is this, there are people behind every IT system. We're talking about IT systems here as though they're autonomous systems. They are not. So what is your quality assurance for veterans? Because as the chairman pointed out, they just didn't follow up and nobody caught it. Where are the people in this system?
So that in the typical scenario, software will get developed by developers. It will be passed to a full QA test in a pre-production environment.
I'm not talking about the pre-production. I'm talking about once you get it up and running, who is doing the quality checks, the percentage check, a 10% check, whatever. Who's doing that? And that may be a question for Mr. Worthington, but who's doing that check?
No,
because it should not have taken a decade for us to find this if you had a QA process in place.
Let me start, and then I'll definitely pass it to Charles for more elaboration on it. But any of the systems that we run are monitored and have telemetry on them so that they're checking for any error conditions that occur. In the particular cases we're talking about here, these are places where those error conditions actually were not caught by monitoring. We meet every single day of the year and walk through any issues that occur. And one of the questions I ask most often is, was that error caused by or caught by monitoring or not? We need to do more monitoring of situations like this, and we're constantly adding to that monitoring. But in these particular cases, it was a missed error check, and that's we just have to admit that. We constantly improve it, but there's more for us to do.
So you had the error check in place, it just didn't work.
It did not hit these particular circumstances. Charles, do you want to?
Yes, I would just add that I think the challenge that we encountered with the dependency claim issue is that the traceability of a transaction from the VA.gov website into the downstream systems, many of which are quite old, we do not have good traceability at this time of those transactions. That's one of the things we are working to address as a part of this systematic review. What we would like to have is an ability to check for sure that every transaction that is received on VA.gov has made it either into the downstream system that it's intended to do, so it can be automatically processed, or if for whatever reason there is some failure, that there's a backup sort of manual process that puts those in place.
Okay, so who was responsible for missing the quality checks, and was there action taken against the person responsible for that? Are we holding anyone accountable for these errors?
So I think there's multiple aspects to the answer there. First, I think Charles and I would both say we hold ourselves accountable for this. And it's our responsibility at the end of the day. And if there are errors like this, we work hard to make sure they're right. But at the end, you have to hold us accountable. The second area is I think that we have tried very hard in the team since I've started of creating an environment, which I coined the phrase, embrace the red. You can't have teams where they come into these status meetings fearful for their jobs if they come clean on an issue that occurs. And so I've encouraged the exact opposite.
My time is out, so I appreciate your response, but I think that people need to be held accountable, and holding someone accountable is not just saying you're accountable. It is sanctions against someone that missed this, because in this case, 56,000 veterans are paying the price. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Self. I will now recognize Representative Luttrell for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to follow on Mr. Worthington and Mr. Delmini, did anything happen to either one of you for this, I would say, egregious act against 56,000 veterans? You are ultimately to be held responsible. I heard you say that, sir.
Right. I would certainly, if somebody came to me and said, we want to take action, that, obviously I have an employer.
I'm just trying to get clarification for myself and for Mr. Self, that nobody above you came down into your level and said, because of these errors that were made on 56,000 veterans who served our country, and by the way, that's 2011. That's right as the Iraqi war was drawing down. I'm just curious. Nobody has approached either one of you saying that this was a problem.
Oh, they've definitely approached us and said this is a problem.
But no actions were taken whatsoever?
Have they taken employment action against me?
So that's one of the problems with the VA system, and I greatly appreciate what the VA does as a whole, but when you get down to the granular level, I think we have a problem with addressing the major issues in leadership and not being held accountable for things that they do or do not do, and uphold their fiduciary responsibilities to veterans like myself, like this gentleman here, and like that gentleman over there.
If I may, respectfully, the environment and the culture that I have seen among the senior leadership under Secretary McDonough has been one of pushing for excellence in terms of execution, but support of us.
I agree. I think Mr. McDonough does a fantastic job, but that's not the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking is, my concern is that nobody's holding you responsible for this. You said you were in charge of it, but I'll move on.
If I may, I think this is true for Mr. Worthington as well. We are our own worst critics in cases like this. We hold ourselves to an incredible.
When I go
high
home
standard.
and talk to the veterans in my community who may or may not have been affected by this, and I look them in the face and say, and they ask me who's being held responsible, what am I supposed to say, the VA?
I think you're supposed to say the VA and the people in my team.
Okay, so what happened to you? Nothing. Zero. You're sitting here in front of me telling me that. That's the problem that we're trying to get past. That's the problem that we have to go back to our base and say, we're doing everything that we can to streamline this process. Mr. Tellez, 120 days. Are you a veteran, sir? Forgive me. I'm not. Okay, so if I go back to my base and I say 120 days, they'll lose their minds. And that's just something that we have to do right now because I'm asking you the questions, and the answer that you give me to my question is 120 days. Now, if I go tell a veteran that who is in dire straits, I'm the one that has to answer that question. I don't even work for the VA. You see the frustrations here? That's rhetorical. Don't answer it. But I'll move on. Mr. Tellez, there are probably a lot of veterans who are concerned that the VA might have lost their claims and filings over the past decade because of this the VA.gov website, the UX UI experience. What do our veterans need to do in order to course correct if there is an issue?
Thank you, Congressman, for your question. I think right now, if they're concerned that they did file a claim and they don't see it when they check the status of their claim on VA.gov, then they can call, or they could check VA.gov. If they don't see it there, then they could call the call center, and we'll certainly address that question there.
So I have to go back to my veterans and tell them the VA possibly made a mistake, so you, the veteran, need to re-engage instead of the VA reaching out to the veteran and saying, hey, we made a mistake and we want to fix this, it wasn't your fault?
We have done some outreach, sending letters. We are sending letters when we take actions on those claims as well. That's both for the 526 issue for disability claims and for the dependency claims as well. We'll send out correspondence.
Which specific department in the VA is handling that issue? Is that you directly?
It is not me directly, but it is VBA that is handling that and for that.
It wouldn't be the VBA as a whole. It would be, there would be a little contingent in there somewhere.
It's probably a combination of our field operations and our policy and oversight division.
Who would be leading that? I need a name.
I can get you a name.
I'll be looking for it by tomorrow, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all.
Okay. Mr. Worthington, back to the IT situation, if you will. You stated that there's been a lot of progress. I'm pretty savvy when it comes to the UX UI, the IoT space. Now, what do you mean by that?
Sure. The website itself every year is seeing an increasing amount of usage. For example, this past year, we have had 64 million times where somebody has signed into the website, which is up over 50% from the previous year. And that same platform that we use to build VA.gov has enabled us recently to launch the VA flagship mobile app, the Health and Benefits mobile app. That's been downloaded 1.8 million times and has a 4.8 star rating in the Apple App Store, which is on par with USAA and Bank of America. That's sort of what we aspire to do, is to give veterans an experience that will match what they're getting in the private sector. And we feel we're making progress at that goal, although these issues obviously are our top priority.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Luttrell. Just for disclosure purposes, I am not a veteran, so I appreciate your confidence in the work that I'm doing here. I want to make sure everybody knows that everything that I do here is focused on making sure that we do deliver those benefits to the veterans that they have earned, okay? This is not a gift. This is something that they have earned, and they are supposed to get them. And as I was sitting here listening to that exchange and about people saying, I take accountability, I agree with my two representative friends over here. Saying that you take accountability and seeing the action for it are two dramatically different things. I saw problems taking place in Fort Harrison Veterans Hospital in Helena, Montana last year, and worked with Secretary McDonald to have an extensive investigation and analysis done. And you want me to tell you what accountability is? We changed the director. We had the director removed from Fort Harrison because she was not conducting the affairs properly. She was not a leader. She was allowing things to take place that should not have been taking place, okay? That's accountability, gentlemen. That's accountability. Mr. Tellez, I'm really glad to hear that the 560 veterans whose intent to file under the PACT Act that weren't received actually have been recognized and that that has been resolved. They've been taken care of. I do want to make sure that each impacted veteran that's applying for anything is taken care of. Will you consider every veteran's appeal timely who was unable to file the notice of disagreement when we start talking about the disability benefits and things like that? If it's not timely, are you going to recognize that?
Clarifying question, Congressman. Are you talking about the NOD issue or the appeal for related to the ITF issue?
Quite frankly, any benefit whatsoever. If they have filed, okay, and they have filed within the time frame that they were supposed to, and they did not have recognition given back to them to even tell them that the system didn't recognize that, are you going to consider all of those as timely filings? We've got 94,000 people that have made applications, and somewhere along the line, they weren't recognized.
Right. Well, I think the veteran always has the right to appeal a thing, and we will absolutely consider these system errors as we consider that appeal and we adjudicate it. Absolutely, we will consider this as one of those factors.
Mr. Del Bene, you've been making a distinction between VA.gov, which you believe is great, and the systems interfaces underneath of VA.gov, which you acknowledge widespread technical problems. Veterans who are trying to apply for benefits and getting error messages obviously aren't interested in that distinction. They just know there's a problem. They don't know whether it's VA.gov or with the system that's underneath of it. A problem is a problem to them. Doesn't any problem with any system that touches the website risk creating these errors?
I'm not 100% I understand which direction you're heading, but I will say that any error that starts from the perspective of VA.gov, regardless of what system it descends into, yes, they'll think of that as the same sort of error. And we shouldn't have to have our veterans understand the distinction between, for instance, VBMS and VA.gov. So I think I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
Mr. Worthington, you've been working on a lot more of this distinction, it sounds like, okay? Are you parsing out, if you will, where that problem actually is, whether it's on VA.gov or whether it is the system underneath or whether it's the interface, okay, the connection of the two?
Yes, obviously for our teams, it matters a lot where the specific problem is because we're trying to go solve it. But for the veterans, to your point, we're not trying to explain to them where the system failure is. We just need to make a very clear, simple explanation for what has gone wrong in any given case so that they don't have to understand the inner workings of the VA.
Mr. Del Bene, you've clearly known for a while that VA.gov and other systems that it touches need a lot of work. Either you're just starting to understand how these different systems interact and create errors, or you've known about it and you're just now getting serious about tackling it. Can you break that down for me? What's going on?
Since I joined January of last year, I've done deep technical dives across the entire set of portfolio of the VA applications. These are a set of over 1,000 applications. These issues have come up along the way. For instance, we talked about the one that happened just last month with the increase in traffic that went to the VA.gov website. As the issues identify themselves, we're tackling those issues as quickly as humanly possible. I've also been doing deep dives into the portfolio to try to proactively identify those places where there are vulnerabilities that could show up that have not yet. I think across the board, to your point, it shows that there is a lot of modernization that needs to happen across the entire estate that we take care of in OIT as part of VA.gov or part of the VA.
Thank you very much. I will now recognize Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick for another round of questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. My question's for Mr. Del Bene. What is your plan to ensure that the IT system used by blind and low vision VA employees are accessible and support them while they're doing their jobs? It's a follow-up question from the Section 508 that we were started on.
Thank you for the question. It's a good one. And it's, as I said, there's multiple classes of content, so to speak, that blind and visually impaired folks need to be able to access. There are web pages, PDFs, and then there are the applications themselves. The applications are fairly thorny because of the complexity involved, and it's also not as objective in how you measure them. You actually have to take scenarios through it. So what we're doing is we're identifying the top most important applications that people need to use. We're then grading them based on a scale of from A to F as to how good they are at the present. And then we're setting criteria of must-fix issues before the application can get approved. So we've been doing this against the EHRM that we're working on with Cerner. We're going to tackle that across the entire fleet of applications. To a point here, we actually recently delayed the launch of our new timesheeting application just because the 508 compliance was not to where we thought it should be. So you got to have teeth on this as well.
And what's your requirement for your software vendors?
Well, we need to push that. In a lot of cases, as you know, those applications are built by third parties. And so we need to set criteria and have established criteria. We define must-have scenarios that have to get fixed as part of the SHIP criteria.
When will we be able to get those criteria that you'll have set?
We can follow up with you, and it would probably be better as a discussion than actually us kind of giving you a textual reply. But in fact, it's probably a good question for the 27th.
Okay, because my concern is that we're not getting any real deadlines. And so as we're anticipating when we'll start seeing changes, I haven't gotten any set goals or deadlines or even requirements in place. So making sure we can establish that is imperative so we're not doing this over and over for years to come.
Yeah, I do want to caution you, though, that getting to 508 compliance because of the breadth of the portfolio is going to be more of a journey than us being able to tell you on such and such a date we are fully 508 compliant. But we can talk to you about our progress, we can talk to you about our goals, et cetera, and I kind of welcome that conversation with you.
Okay, as long as we're meeting those goals and setting those goals, that's what's important. Full compliance might be a stretch, but we should at least have points to meet substantial completion. We should have midterm points so we can get there as we're forecasting. And without those points, we're kind of just moving without a target in mind. And we need to have those targets so we're not looking 10 years later wondering why it took us so much time. So those targets are very important. My next questions are about readiness. Veterans who deployed to combat zones and left the military between September 11th through 2001 and October 1st, 2013 have until 11:59 p.m. this Saturday, September 30th, to directly enroll in VA healthcare regardless of whether or not they have applied for the disability benefits. Mr. Del Bene, given the issues experienced with the backdated benefits deadline in August, how confident are you that the VA is prepared for an increase in applications before the healthcare access deadline?
Thank you for the question. We have actually intensively scrubbed all aspects of what delivering that service means. But let me pass it over to Charles, and he can talk to you about the website in particular and the back-end systems it's connected to.
We are monitoring very closely the flow for the, we call it the 1010 Easy, the healthcare enrollment form, and we have seen a big increase in applications. I was just looking this up and saw that in the past 30 days, we have processed over 30,000 healthcare enrollments on VA.gov. That compares to 12,000 in June and around 13,000 in July. So we're seeing a big increase, and so far the systems are holding up very well. We're obviously monitoring it very intently as we approach that Saturday deadline, but that's something we're watching very closely, and we'll continue to monitor until the end of the deadline.
So specifically, your confidence level is high?
At this time, I would say it's high, yes.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Surplus McCormick. I'll now recognize Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to the 56,000 veterans. Mr. Tellez, I want to address three different categories of veterans that we might see. Are you going to force veterans to pay back overpayments?
Thank you for your question, sir. No, we will adjudicate those claims, and where we had undue debts recovered from them, no.
Okay, how about veterans that have been underpaid? Will you make them whole?
Yes, yes.
Okay, veterans that have already paid back erroneous overpayments.
So we're looking at that, the authority that we have to do that, to reclaim that money, absolutely, as a result of this defect error.
So you're planning to reclaim it if you have the authority?
I believe so, yes. Oh, reclaim. I think where veterans have already paid back some of their debt, I think is maybe what I didn't hear. Then I think what we are looking to is who are those veterans, and then how can we do that? Yes.
And they've already been forced to pay back their overpayments. Okay, so what are you going to do with them?
I think as a result of this error, that's what we're looking at, to how do we provide that relief back to them.
How many do you think have done that?
I don't have that. We're doing that assessment right now of the 56,000, so I don't
Nope.
have that data for you today.
And I may have misspoken. We're talking about erroneous debts here, okay? That they've been forced to pay back erroneous debts already. How many would that be?
I don't have that assessment for you yet, but we will work on getting that. I know we're working on assessing that 56,000 population, and we'll, I'm sure by October, be able to tell you a little bit more in detail what those different populations look like.
Okay, we've been talking a lot about process here, which kind of frustrates me because I'd love to talk about results as opposed to just process. And let me give you another process that we have been dealing with here in Congress, and that's the appeals process. The appeals board, for a long time, has not been able to do its job in a timely manner. So we have actually put in a bill to add 2 judges to the appeals court because the board won't act in an expeditious manner. So the process that we're discussing here gets a little frustrating to me because we can't seem to have results that we're trying to get at here. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Self. I recognize Representative Luttrell.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tellez, let's, the 32,000 veterans whose claims were lost and then found in January. That ring a bell? Where were they found?
I think that's probably going to have to turn that to Charles.
Yes, so
Mr. Worthington.
the specific issue that occurred was between VA.gov and the downstream system that processes those claims.
Can you do me a favor and elaborate what you mean on downstream, please?
Sure. So when a claim is ultimately going to be processed by the claims processor using a system called VBMS, and there's a couple of interfaces between VA.gov and VBMS to get that set up correctly. And what we found in these cases was that these 32,000, in these cases, there was an error in the establishment of the claim. So it was submitted on VA.gov.
Same one on all 32,000?
A similar type of error that led to the claim not being accepted by one of those downstream systems. The data associated with the claim.
Which downstream system didn't pick it up? If they're similar, say it out loud.
So the exact nature of the errors, there was probably a category of them. So for an example, there might have been a character in one of the fields submitted that was not accepted. You know, it had an accent on it. Or,
/ and they didn't pick it up.
As an example,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So what we have found, though, is that the actual original data is still maintained in the VA.gov system, which we've been able to use to recreate the full claim, and that's what we're now being able to use for processing. But that original claim did not make it into the VBMS system so that it could begin the processing due to these technical errors.
So we have to rework multiple systems in order for it to be able to be read by VA.gov.
What we have now developed in this case is basically a backup process. So if this type of problem were to happen again, rather than take the automated digital path, we're going to create a PDF version of the claim as if a veteran had mailed it and work it as if it was a paper claim.
One person's doing that or the team?
The team. So this system will automatically now send the claim into our central mail portal where it gets picked up just like any other claim submitted via paper if it were to hit this case, this error case again, as a backup to the automated process.
These 32,000 claims are being added on to all the other claims that are sitting in that silo, correct?
I would defer to Ray on that, but yes, they would be added.
It's another add-on.
Added to the queue to be worked. Yes.
Just to be clear, there it isn't the intake portal actually has a finite number of things awaiting processing. This is not, we're not talking about the large set of claims that are being worked.
This is a particular portion of the totality, correct?
Right, exactly.
So it is, we need to address this. Yeah? That sounds like a pretty fair assessment.
So just to pick up from Charles going to my mail portal, so we're processing mail in about 6 hours. So should there be an error and that paper form is created, it gets inserted to my mail portal, we'll process that in under 6 hours. Then that goes into the normal work queue for NWQ. And of that 32,000, we're already working on those right now. In fact, we've established about 25,000 of those. And of those already, we have made decisions on, I don't have the number in front of me, but about 14,000. So we're taking action on those now. We're reviewing them. From our perspective, these are claims that veterans probably have already doubled. So the expectation is we've touched it once. And really, at this point, we just need to make sure that what was previously missed, it matches what we have, and then make an administrative action, or we adjudicate for the areas that there's differences. So we're already working those 32,000 claims right now.
Mr. Worthington, let's just do the math on this. What else are we missing? There's going to be something that's going to pop up because of one little character or whatever that may be, and it's going to be a substantial number, if I had to guess, given the amount of veterans that the VA has to deal with. Are you directly in charge of the oversight of the system in order to find these faults?
Yes, we are looking exactly at this category of bug that was sort of tied up in the 526 and the dependency claim issue across all of the VA.gov features right now to see if there are any other places where we could be missing something that could be similar. And so far, we have not found any large number, but anything that we do find, we are going to identify and build both a better process, but also make sure that we have not have any similar types of cases where there's a claim or a form that has been submitted that should have been worked but was not. We're looking very intently at that right now.
Okay, and I'll close with this, following on Ms. McCormick's statement about Mr. Delbini. The reason a timeline and dates makes sense, and it does for us, and this is maybe another issue I have with the VA. They don't seem to ever want to put a timeline, a hard day, on what we consider a success. I find that frustrating considering everything that we're having to deal with the VA. And I'm talking out loud, or I'm not talking directly at you per se, okay? There's no accountability if we go swimming past that at 1,000 miles an hour. And that's unfortunate because if you unpack this thing, it's a human being we're talking about. That's why dates are so important to us. That's why we want to know exactly when this is going to happen. Even if you don't make it, hey, we got 3/4 of the way there, we fell short, we're going to keep going. Mr. Chairman, I apologize, I went over. I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative Luttrell. What we're going to do is a third shortened round, lightning round, I'd like to call it. I think several of us have a couple of short little questions we'd like to wrap up with. Mr. Delbeni, let me ask you about the Benefits IT Modernization Plan in the PACT Act. Speaking about quantifiable, measurable deadlines and accomplishments, that's exactly what I want to get to. You have over $130 million of projects to upgrade the VA.gov in the plan. How much of that money have you spent so far, and what can you show us that's been accomplished? What quantifiable, what measured success can you share with us?
In terms of the amount spent, I really should get back to you because I need to get with the team and get with our central finance organization to find out how much has been spent. The process that we go through, in the 701B filing, we basically laid out everything what the investment is for. We laid out what the actual milestones are in terms of moving from the existing architecture to the new architecture. I can probably come back to you and say, this is exactly where we are on the milestones, if that would be.
That is exactly what I want. I would like to see that spreadsheet, okay, that says, here's how much money we have spent out of this, and here's the success rates, and here's the marks that we have hit to accomplish whatever task that you have laid out for those funds.
Sure, let us take that away to figure out the best way to communicate to that so it addresses your questions.
Greatly appreciated. Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The construction authority was taken away from the VA several years ago. Should Congress consider taking IT authority away from VA so that you can focus on health care? Would that be something to streamline VA's focus strictly on the veteran as opposed to this very complex IT problem.
When you say take it away, what did you have in mind to do with it?
Well, I don't know, because the construction authority is my example. It was taken away and given to the Corps of Engineers because of construction missteps in the past by the VA. So taken away from the VA so that some other organization would be responsible for IT so that VA could focus on healthcare. How do we get VA focused on 100,000 people who have fallen through the cracks? How do we focus you? Would that do it?
I actually think that would be a mistake. The best software is built in tight cooperation between the stakeholders, the people using the software, and the people building the software.
Okay, and I suspected that would be your answer. In my second real quick question, I'm not an IT guy, so I'll use the term, all of these things that seem to disappear, did you have a cache system or were they still there, or did they disappear into the Ethernet, some that we don't know about? So can you find everything eventually, or are they gone?
Yes, I could answer that, Representative. We have a very good log of all of the benefit forms that were submitted on VA.gov, which has allowed us to basically reconstruct those claims.
Even the ones that were not
That's correct. So
dealt with?
In the category of the claims that were delayed due to these technical issues, yes, we do have all of the data.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Okay, that seems as we are done. Thank you to all the witnesses, and you are excused from the witness table. We expect more from VA.gov because in a few years' time, it will go from a convenience that a minority of the veterans use to the default option for most of the veterans very, very soon now. We've seen this in banking and insurance and so many other businesses and industries. Most Americans don't want to walk into a building or dial a call center to handle their routine transactions. Most folks, they're accustomed to doing it right from their phone, quite frankly. They expect to do these things on a website 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But they do expect the transactions to be accurate and efficient and recorded, quite frankly. I absolutely agree that VA.gov is the front door of the Department of Veterans Affairs. It's the right priority to have because veterans need to have confidence in it. The committee's focus on this issue is going to continue. We need to see what has been accomplished and what is left to do at the end of the VA's 90-day review. My colleagues and I understand very clearly that the systems that process VA benefits have historically been neglected. That's why we prioritized upgrading these systems in the PACT Act in anticipation of the flood of the additional claims that were going to be coming through before anyone at the department ever said a word about the glitches and bugs that we have been hearing about here today. The VA must demonstrate that the funding Congress is providing for the benefits IT modernization plan is being put to good use. Our witnesses can expect to be called upon again as they work their way through the plan. With that, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend the remarks. And I invite Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick to make any closing statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the testimony and answers of our witnesses this afternoon. I recognize that no IT solution is perfect. They are constantly evolving and changing, and that evolution introduces risk. I appreciate the fact that Assistant Secretary Del Bene came in person today to discuss the shortcomings with VA.gov. It was important for us to hear from the leader accountable for these programs about the department's plan to address past issues and mitigate future disturbances to ensure that the VA IT system does not prevent veterans from accessing their care and benefits that they have very hardly earned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Sherfless McCormick. And with that, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend the remarks and include extraneous material. With no objection, so ordered, the hearing is adjourned.